Let's get started. So hopefully you recognize the title. And what we're doing today is we're going to be talking about the 10 most common mistakes in federal government contracting. And, I call them mistakes, but but on the obverse of what a mistake is an opportunity. If you do the things to avoid that mistakes, you're doing the right things to be successful. And I can all but guarantee you that if you avoid these 10 mistakes by doing the 10 things that you really must do in order to be successful in the GovCon industry, you're going to create some generational wealth. Here's the reality. I'm not going to be able to get to all the information I really want to, and I want to share some good sources of information, and that is governmentcontractingacademy.com, GCA, governmentcontractingacademy.com, gcacampus.com, and our sister organization, the ISO certification group.com. There's a ton of information there. So I'm supposed to give a credibility slide. So here it is. I've won about $2 billion in federal government contracts. I've been in this industry for about a quarter of a century. Those icons, logos, companies to the right of my picture, those are my babies. Those are my companies. To the right of those are Washington technology headlines that are still floating around on the internet somehow, showing that just because you're in the small business set-aside program, it doesn't mean that the opportunities are small. That is a strategic point I'm going to hopefully make today and prove to you that those are the type of opportunities that you should be pursuing. And they're a lot easier to pursue than what you may think, especially if you have a couple of tips underneath your belt. Here's my real credibility to do this talk. In 2003, I launched my first company, a government contracting company called Analytic Strategies. And for 11 years, I made each and every one of these 10 mistakes over and over and over for over a decade, And the deal is I'm not going to be too critical of myself because there was no training programs at that time to help small business owners in the federal government contracting industry. That's why I launched Government Contracting Academy in 2020. There's not a single MBA program to this very date that specializes in the world's largest customer, the U.S. federal government. Shocking, but true. But then I figured it out. And as soon as I figured it out, I was off to the races. I really was. And so I'll talk a little bit about this curve later on. But, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. And what I discovered that by correcting mistake number five, so pay attention to number five, the solution to correct number five also helped me solve number six, seven, eight, nine, and 10. So, six of these 10 common mistakes were resolved with one strategy is we are going to look at the four mistakes requiring, somewhat unique solutions. And as you may suspect, most people struggle right out of the blocks. And the reason why they struggle right out of the blocks is they keep on putting off the launch of their company. So this is an obvious first mistake that a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs have. They always put things off like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And I call this the free lunch tomorrow mistake because, as we all know the joke, there is when tomorrow rolls around, tomorrow is not tomorrow, it's today. So, you never get there. And it's the same way with these people who feel like they're never quite ready to launch their company. And the reason why that is because they all have fragile egos, yours truly included. Man, I was so scared about getting my feelings hurt. So I was so scared about getting my feelings hurt, I didn't pursue my dreams. Scary but true. And I remember having this one conversation with my father-in-law, and he doesn't remember this at all, but man, it is imprinted in my brain. I will never forget this conversation. It was about a 60-second conversation. And I was talking to him about, launching my government contracting company. And I told him, hey, I'm almost there. I need to do this. I need to do this first. And he pulled me aside and he says, Randy, he says, you're getting to that age where you got to stop preparing to have success and you actually got to just do it. It's like, geez, my father-in-law called me out. Now, to this very day, he doesn't remember that, but it changed my life. Now, if this was a Hollywood story, then I would tell you that I launched my company the next day, which I did, and that it was wildly successful, which it wasn't. However, that failure, that initial failure that I never would have gotten around to experiencing was the cornerstone to my future successes. It really was. And the reason why that is because you don't know what you don't know. So how do you discover what you don't know? By trying to do it. It's so simple. and it's really extraordinarily efficient. By failing, you try, you fail, you fix it, and then you try again. It's the most efficient thing in the world. Trying to prevent a failure can take you years, years. Failing and then fixing it can take you as little as a week or two. So it is so efficient. If you want success and you want success now, just do it. Failure is part of the success process. You got to do it. Now, I want to tell you why most people fail this thing. Most people fail because they start out on the wrong foot. What they'll do is they'll go out and they get a static business plan. They will find a template online. It'll be 100 pages long. They'll download it and they'll populate it. And they'll spend months doing that. And that is their plan. And as they start to execute it, they're going to realize, like, oh man, this kind of sucked. This wasn't really right. Man, we screwed this up a little bit. But they're committed to that plan because it is the plan. And what they start to do is, even though it's going in the wrong direction, they'll start putting lipstick on the pig. They'll try to dress it up because when failure is not an option, guess what? It's not going to be. You're going to keep on putting so much lipstick on the pig that it doesn't look like a failure, but it is. And so what I recommend and what we teach in Government Contracting Academy is to use the DADDY framework: dream, analyze, define, develop, execute, and evaluate. Every single time I've used this process, I've had business success. Every single business that I launched using this process, or I transformed, or whatever it is, by using this process, I was successful. In my opinion, it's a roadmap just to print money. It really is. So you got to have that iterative process where you're expected to figure out ways to do it better. So moving forward, this right here is the first real mistake that I want to talk about tonight, and that is most small businesses, they fail from the very beginning because they launched the wrong company supporting the wrong markets. I call this mistake fishing from the pier, same pier as everybody else. They find the most obvious marketplace. It's like, there it is. It's the perfect one. DOD, tons of budget, and I'm a service disabled vet, and I'm doing this particular, sexy thing in uniform, and I'm going to get out and I'm going to do it again. And, as a contractor, well, guess what? So are all of your other peers that just left the service who's doing those same sexy, pointy end of the spear stuff. And now you have saturated markets there. Now then the DoD is so big that there's actually pockets in DoD that nobody touches. Nobody touches, and you scratch your head like saying, like, why are you beating your head up against the wall in a saturated market when there's nobody fishing on that pier? So what I tell people is, before you launch your company, you've got to identify the best markets for your business. And one of the ways you do that is you take a look, and we're going to rely heavily on the small business set aside program. You're going to look at the agencies that cannot meet their small business set aside goals because they can't find enough of these set aside types to give the full earmark to. In 2022, this is 2022 data, 20 out of 24 agencies did not meet their small business subcontracting goals. And I'm highlighting subcontracting because that's how most small businesses, get their start. That's how they get the market penetration. And guess what? They can't find enough qualified small business in these various set-aside types to give the full earmarks to. If it's yellow, it's an opportunity because they can't find enough of that particular type of set-aside in that agency. And I highlight HubZone. And the reason why I do that is because if you're not a woman, or if you're not an 8A eligible company, which means minority, and if you're not a service disabled vet, you can always launch a HubZone company. And the reason why is because that's dependent upon the location of your corporate office and having 35% of your employees reside in HubZone. Now, if you're a one-person startup, having 35% means that of employees residing in a HubZone, that means you have to have one HubZone resident working part-time for minimum wage. It's very, very, very doable. And look how much the government is struggling to find enough of them. Why in the world do you want to fish off the same pier in markets as everybody else? Now, I will caution you. Now, this is like, for example, Department of Defense. If you look at Department of Defense, you can say, well, the Department of Defense is really sucking at meeting all of them. Well, Department of Defense is so big that they have parts of defense in the Defense Department that are absolutely saturated. Absolutely. And then they have other stuff like acquisition support services, budget, stuff that nobody, everybody thinks is boring that nobody wants to do. So nobody does it. And they got, billions of dollars in earmarks are just sitting there, and there's not enough small businesses to join these bid teams, that are being identified by these prime contractors in order to be able to take the subcontracting earmarks. So find those markets, find the markets, that can't find enough of whatever you are, and chase those with a vengeance. Here's another somewhat generic but extraordinarily important mistake to avoid, and that is you got to do the right things as a CEO. Um, there's two problems that prevent most small business CEOs from doing the right things. One, and this is the big one, is that they hate to do uncomfortable things. And what do I mean by uncomfortable things? Well, uncomfortable things for most people is business development. Why is business development so uncomfortable? Well, because business development is about 90% rejection and 10%, success. So nobody counts the rejections, but we all feel bad about it. The success is the only thing that matters. If you need to reach out to 10 people to get one success, you've reached out to 10 people for this success. Nobody's counting your losses. This is not gambling. You do not have to put $100 down on the table to potentially win $200 in a bet. You don't lose anything. Now, the second reason that these that CEOs fail to do the right things is what I call, being a good plumber does not make you a good plumbing company CEO. They're completely different job descriptions. When you're a plumber, you're doing plumbing work. When you're a plumbing company CEO, you're doing CEO stuff. And everybody feels extremely comfortable doing their last job. Everybody. So they don't do their new job. But as a CEO, I would say 99% of your job is doing uncomfortable things. So if you enjoy, and this, IT people are the world's worst. Like, hey, I really enjoy technology. I love it. I'm going to launch my own IT company. And guess what? Well, guess who's not going to be doing IT in the future? You, because you're no longer an IT person. You're an executive. You're a CEO. Your job is growth and infrastructure. That is it. It's culture. It's those things there. Has nothing to do with IT. Now, when you're starting out, it's good to know some IT stuff because you're going to be the one writing your proposals and talking the talk and all that kind of stuff. So you need to be able to do that too. But for the most part, your job is no longer doing IT, is being a chief executive. In case I'm being too subtle, 99% of every small business owner's job is business development. Every single CEO. But yet, most CEOs fill their days with 85, 90% of level of effort stuff. You got to flip that. That is a mindset. All that level of effort stuff that makes you feel good that you're getting checks in the block, and things that you got to do those in the crevices. Do those, after hours because they don't add any value to your company. That's just the cost of doing business. And because of that, that mistake leads into this one. Most small business CEOs, they have this vision that somehow that they are going to miraculously get, a subcontract. They believe that Prince Charming is going to knock on their door and say, "Hey, small business, are you the right fit for this subcontract? And I want to see if you are. And if you are, I'm going to give it to you." That is a fairy tale. A fairy tale. That will never happen. You know, they have never even heard of your company. Never, ever, ever. Why are they going to look for you? They're busy. They're executives in big companies. They're not going to do that. But yet, if you were to really poke, these small business owners, say, like, how are you really going to get that? You got to reverse engineer how you're going to get that subcontract. And if it doesn't start, with somehow or another engaging in an uncomfortable situation with a business development executive with a big company, it's just unrealistic. It's a dream. It's a daydream, is what it really is. So here's the good news. There are 40,000 business development executives who work for large GovCon companies. 40,000. I counted them. 40,000. Now, I know that not all 40,000 are going to be working for companies that are ideally aligned with your market space. I get that, but at least half of them are. So 20,000 business development executives exist right this very second that can change your company's trajectory. 20,000. Now, you got to engage with these people. You got to be known by these people. So if you look at this crowd, in this picture, guess who you've got to be? You got to be the fanatic. And you're the one who's got to be in their face in a polite, constructive, way, professional way. But you got to be there. You got to be known. You got to be seen. You got to be rallying them around your company and what you can do for them. That's your job as the CEO of a business. You are the face of your company. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that in a meaningful way? Now, I have people in Government Contracting Academy, they say, "Hey, Randy, your program's just not working." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" He says, "Well, I reached out to 8 people, last month, and nobody seemed interested." And I just shake my head. I said, "Look, you reached out to 8?" I said, "There's 20,000, business development executives out there that are aligned, that work for companies that are aligned with your interest in your market space. There's 20,000, you reached out to 8." I said, "You come back to me after you reached out to 8,000 and you haven't had any success." And now the next question is, well, how do you reach out to 8,000? Like I'm so busy as it is. I barely had time to reach out to 8. Well, technology makes it really, really, really easy to do that. I'm going to walk you through just a quick use case. So let's just say you want to target HHS and you want to do healthcare IT or some type of IT support services for them. So what do? You do some Googles and you find lists, of the largest awardees that, in HHS that does, that do IT support services. So you got a list of companies. And then what you do is you take those lists of companies and you go to a tool like LinkedIn Sales Navigator and you plug in the companies. And then what you do is you plug in all business development titles that you can think of. And then in the keyword section, you can type in like HHS, to make sure that the people that are going to be pulled up from LinkedIn, have HHS all over their LinkedIn profile. So you do that. And again, I just did this very quickly with just a handful of companies. There's 1,500. Now, again, this is just scratching the surface. I'm going to show you how sending out a single LinkedIn message to 1,500 business development executives is just as easy as sending one out. So there are LinkedIn automation tools that you can use to send out message requests or connection requests. And with those connection requests, you've got 300 characters. So do a note. Now, these technologies, they will actually customize this right here and personalize it. So it'll be hi first name. It drags the first name from their profile. It'll be like, "Hi, Bob. I'm the CEO of an ISO 9001, ISO 27001 certified hub zone, and we're pursuing a large set aside opportunity and believe Northrop Grumman would be an ideal strategic partner. I'd love to meet to share capabilities briefs. Please let me know your availability. Thanks, Randy." Now, I tell people to only expect, a 3 or 4% hit rate. Now, the people in Government Contracting Academy that actually do this with a couple of ISO certifications, they're getting around an 8% hit rate. And what do I mean by, an 8% hit rate? By 8% of those, of the people that they reach out to, they're energized. They're excited to engage with them. They want to learn more. They say, "Hey, I don't have anything now, but man, I wish I knew about you 6 months ago because I had this, deal and I really needed you for it." And so that 8%, I tell people if you stay engaged and you keep that relationship warm and you grow it within a period of about 2 years, they will have the potential to make your life better either by giving you a teaming agreement, a subcontract, or agreeing to be one of your partners on one of your strategic bids. So what is 4 to 8%, of 1,500 people? Well, 8% of 1,500 is 120. I should have prepped that. I don't know if that's right, but I think it's 120. So you got 120 people that are excited to learn more about you. 120 the people who can make your life better over the next 2 years. 120. Now, let's just say instead of 1,500, you sent that out to 15,000. So that 120 just becomes a very, very, very big number. It's more than you can effectively manage. And that's just LinkedIn automation. You can even reach more people through email automation. You can do thousands really easily via email. And we teach you how to do that in Government Contracting Academy. Moving on, mistake number five, I prepped that and I told you that the solution that I came up with for mistake number five really, corrected all the other mistakes that I was making. So let's talk about mistake number five. I call mistake number five the high school band car wash mistake. Why do I call it that? It's because most small businesses do not try to mature their business, do not try to grow internally into the company that they aspire to be. So they still operate like that ad hoc, crazy one person, entity who's working from a Starbucks stool. That's how most people continue to operate their company well into the future. And then they wonder why they're failing. Well, they're failing for the same reasons that a high school band car wash is not a successful, sustainable, growing business entity. And the reason why it's not a business, even though that it has both customers and revenue, is because they have zero quality. There's three things that you need I can guarantee you with every experience you have with a high school band car wash. One, you're gonna feel good that you donated money, to a good cause. Two is you're gonna leave with a lot of soap on your car, and then three, you're also gonna leave with a lot of dirt still on your car because it's just chaos if you've ever gone to one of these things, And the reason why is because they have no way of doing business. They don't have a single repeatable anything. Not like a real car wash. If you go to a real car wash, they're going to do a quality job. But look at that. Look at the efficiency. One person. They're covering the entire car. This is going to get done. It's going to look really well. But also look at the quality of the car. It's a Bentley. So now they can charge more money. They're making more profit. It's just a win, 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 win all the way across the board. They got efficiency, it's scalable, it's all this kind of good stuff. So that is the importance of having corporate maturity. The very first thing that corporate maturity does, it gives you an identity. And people think like, oh, how's that important? Well, it's very important. And it's one of those things that I didn't believe it either as a new first-time CEO. Having a corporate identity drives your culture. And that is the number one thing. And it's touchy feely. And I hate touchy feely stuff because at my core, I'm an engineer and I like tangible, hard, facts, things I can put my hands on. You can't put your hands on a culture, but it is by far the most important thing of any company, any company. And I can't think of too many CEOs that have been in the job of a successful company who would not say that. So, it's one of these things that nobody thinks about. Like, I'll think about culture once I start making some real money. Well, at that point, it's kind of too late. It really is. Because your culture is going to be defined by somebody else other than you. So, if you establish your culture to mean customer satisfaction is paramount, we are going to continuously improve. We are going to have management involvement through structured management reviews. We are going to make data-driven decisions. And it's not going to be willy-nilly. We are going to be focused. That's what creates a culture. So, you'll have scalable infrastructure. It'll increase your efficiency. It'll improve your customer satisfaction. And here's a little hidden benefit that I wasn't aware of until I experienced it. It will give you more bandwidth to bid and grow. And then finally, it gives you rapid growth potential. The fastest way to get corporate maturity is to use the ISO 9001 framework, ISO 9001 Quality Management System framework. What does that require? That requires that you have documented roles and responsibilities for all the key personnel in your company, that you have documented processes, that you have a formal risk management program, you perform management reviews, you make data-driven decisions based upon key performance indicators and performance metrics. You have programs like continuous improvement to increase your efficiency. It is 100% scalable infrastructure. and it also proves your corporate maturity. You get to say that you were audited by an accredited third party and found fully compliant with the globally accepted industry best practices for quality management systems. It's not quality, it's management systems. It's all of your management systems. I like to think of quality as just the adjective, of management systems because quality is everything. Quality touches every part of your company. So this is how I discovered this. Let's go back to my real credibility slide where I tell you how stupid I was for making all these 10 mistakes. Well, if you look at this little bump that happened, in 2010, that was my very first prime contract that I had ever won. And about 2012 rolls around, it's ramping up over 2010 and 2011. And come 2012, this is a full-size prime contract, and I am struggling. I am struggling with performance because I lack corporate maturity. Now I'm hiring people left and right, think that's going to help me. It doesn't. And the reason why is because I had a ton of people in my corporate office, but they were all following me around, just cheering me on. Why? Because I didn't have roles and responsibilities identified for those new people. I didn't have documented processes for them to follow. I didn't give them tools and templates, for them to use. We didn't have any policies. I was making that shit up on a daily basis. What's our policy for this? And like, well, I don't know. I guess it's this right here. Let's go with it, until I change my mind tomorrow, that kind of stuff. So for all of these reasons, we were failing miserably. And I almost lost my one and only contract, and I would have been out of business. If they kick you off a contract, you're just done. You really are. So, in 2013, I'm desperate and I'm thinking, like, how do I fix this in a hurry? And I need corporate maturity now. So I did a ton of research and I discovered that using the ISO 9001 quality management system framework is the way to do it. And I used it to get ISO certified, and it just boom, everything clicked into place. And we were making our customer happy. We increased our efficiency. We had so much more bandwidth to actually grow the company. But then I realized that this credential, that this corporate maturity solved all of my other problems that I was facing. And some of these problems, I wasn't even aware that, they were real problems until I had the solution for it. Like, whoa, we look different than what we did last year. What's the difference? Well, now we no longer look, risky, or now we have something to compensate for our lack of experience. This one strategy solved all the other mistakes that I was making. And here, let me show you what they were and how I did it. So this next one that it helped me solve was we didn't have that much of of a resume. We were a small business, we were relatively young, and we had hardly any experience. We were a one contract company. So, we needed to actually compensate for our lack of experience. So as a startup, you need to be aware that your corporate resume is a blank sheet of paper. Why? Because you're lacking work experience and you're also lacking corporate credentials. And with a blank resume, you're never going to make any money. That is a fact. Now, for small business owners, we're slow to realize that. However, we already knew this as individuals. A lot of us in high school, we had aspirations to get into business or become engineers or computer scientists or whatever it is. But very few of us actually blasted out resumes looking for those jobs as high school seniors because we knew that our lack of work experience made us look like we were risky hires. We had nothing on our resume to prove that we knew what we were doing. We were risky. We were risky to be hired. So we all, most of us, we realized like saying, hey, we need to get some credentials. So we went to college and we got degrees, just like this guy right here, Bob. Bob, let's say Bob, he wanted to become a swanky consultant, for like, Boston Consulting or McKinsey or Deloitte or Ernst and Young. So what does he do? Blast his resume out there as a high school senior. He gets nothing. Why? Because he's a risky hire. Based on his resume, his blank resume. So what does he do? He goes to MIT and gets a computer science degree. Then he goes across the street in Cambridge and he goes to Harvard Business School and gets an MBA. And then he sits for a CPA. So On his resume, he still has zero work experience, but he has three credentials, three prestigious credentials. And he's got people standing in line to hire him. It's not because of his work experience, he's got zero. It's because of his credentials are risk mitigators. They prove to potential employers that he would be a really good hire. And that's what ISO certifications are. They are no different than corporate credentials or college degrees for your business. And they compensate for your lack of past performances. And this leads into something else, very, very, very similar. You always hear the trust me, I'm different. All small business owners say this. We're really, really, really good at what it is that we do. Whatever it is that you need, we're the best at it. Prove it. And then you hear crickets. I have a saying when it comes to proposal writing, if you can't provide a proof point, save the real estate. Don't waste the space because the government source selection board is going to read it like this, blah, 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 completely ignored. Now if you got a proof point that proves it, they say, oh, hey, that stuff was real. Here's the proof point that proves it. So if you don't have a proof point, it's not real. So begs the question. There are 31.7 million US businesses. How do you stand out? Saying that you're really, really, really good at something, isn't going to cut it because I guarantee you the other 31.7 million small business owners or CEOs are all going to say the same thing. It's a waste of breath. It really is. So if you get an ISO certification, you are in the top 1% of all US companies. All US companies, not just small, but all. If you have two ISO certifications, you're in the top 0.1 percentile with respect to corporate maturity. That is how you stand out. Now, what does that mean in the government contracting industry? Well, this is how it stands out. Right now, there are over 100,000 small businesses that are registered with the federal government to do business with them. Over 100,000. You don't want to compete and blend into that 100,000 where you are, in best case, as a startup, that you are completely indistinguishable between those. In fact, in many cases, you're showing up as one of those 100,000 and you look worse than the rest of that group. Why? Because you got nothing, you got a blank resume. So you don't want to do that. How do you get that number from 100,000 plus down to a number like 16? Well, the first thing you can do is get two ISO certification, and now all of a sudden you're in the top 0.1%. If you go down to see exactly how many hub zone companies there are, go through the hassle to become a hub zone because there's only 16 as of this is 2022 data. There were only 16 hub zones with two ISO certifications. Now I want you to look at the size of these earmarks. With over a $21 billion prime contract earmark and a $10 billion subcontracting earmark. That's $31 billion of hub zone earmarks, and they don't even come close to meeting that goal. Not even close. And here you are showing up. For example, in the case of HHS, they only had they only met 1.1% of their 3% hub zone subcontracting goal. That means that about 2/3 of that goal went unused. Why? Because they couldn't find enough qualified hub zones, and you're showing up as one of the 16 most qualified, most mature, most legitimate looking hub zone in existence. That's the group that you want to be in. Pursuing $31+ billion in earmarks, of which about half of it is left on the table because they can't find enough. That is where you become hyper competitive. And that's what you need to do. That's the strategy right there. This is something that I was aware of, but I didn't realize how severe it was. If you are in the federal government or you are a large business development executive, you automatically assume that all small businesses are about as risky as eating gas station sushi. And I'm not joking with that. You are perceived to be ridiculously risky. And you know what? That assumption is about dead on. That is an accurate assumption. Now, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, but I was 20 minutes away from not being able to make payroll. And the reason why that is because I really screwed up the invoicing process for my very first prime contract. And I was 20 minutes away, and I would probably say it was about my eighth, I would say maybe my seventh or my eighth payroll. I ran out of money. I ran out of money big time. And I passed the hat around, to friends and family, and hey, that hat came back empty. And I was like, holy shit, what am I going to do? I got this payroll coming up. So now I'm applying for funds and financing and factoring and all this kind of stuff. And I was still waiting for one company to come back. It was a factoring company. And if you know anything about factoring, it is not what you want to do. You're usually just stuck doing it. And I was stuck doing it. Basically, you're selling your invoices for pennies on the dollar, but I needed money now. In fact, I needed it within 20 minutes. And that was the worst day of my professional life. This guy in the fetal position, you know, the only difference between him and me is I was behind my desk whimpering. I am not joking. I was 20 minutes away from not having enough funds to pay my people and having my company just absolutely implode. So it is true. And it's even true in subcontracting. You can say, well, how can that be, Randy? Well, the prime contractor is the one responsible. Why is a company like Northrop Grumman or IBM worried about, risk? Small businesses, they're the one running the show. Well, according to the Small Business Set Aside Program, 30% of a lot of these massive prime contracts, they have a 30% subcontracting requirement. That means that 30% of the value of that contract is going to small businesses that nobody's ever heard of. Nobody. Now, even if you're IBM, one of the most trusted companies in the world, even if you're you're IBM, you're still terrified of risk. And the reason why that is because the government is looking at that third of the contract pie that's being done by small businesses that they ain't never heard of, and they're worried. So if you're smart like IBM, what they do is they only, identify and give teaming agreements to highly mature credentialed small businesses. And they say stuff like, of course, I'm paraphrasing. They're going to say, hey, we're IBM, we're Big Blue. You don't have to worry about the 70% of this contract that we're doing because let's face it, we're the best. However, you don't have to worry about the 30% that's going to be done by our small business team. The reason why that is because we're IBM and we're the best. And we went out and we created the absolute most credentialed, capable, most mature small business team in industry. Our small business partners have ISO 9001, ISO 27001, dot, 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 and they keep on going. That's why it's important. Now, moving on to the next risk that my ISO credentials, unexpectedly resolved for me is even though I knew how proposals were scored, I didn't have the power of ISO to help me out. Most small business owners make this mistake, and I made this mistake for years too. But through practice and I also had experience with big businesses, so writing proposals, so I understood a little bit about the proposal writing game. So I wasn't as bad off as everybody else. But knowing how proposals are scored and being able to maximize that score are two different things. So, but I was still slightly ahead of the power curve because I at least knew how proposals were scored. Most small business owners don't. And they actually believe that it's the best business that wins. Wrong. Even this guy can win. Every proposal across the entire federal government is scored the same way. You are given a technical/risk rating for all the major factors of your proposal. Technical/risk rating. What does that mean? Risk is half of your proposal score. Who knows that? I guarantee you it's like less than 5%, of company owners. Risk is half of your proposal score. So what does that mean? Well, risk is really the assessment of your ability to effectively manage. It's corporate maturity. If they believe that you are a high risk prime contract manager, you're never going to win. So, it's all about risk and corporate maturity. Here's the other thing that people don't understand about how their proposal scored. You get a request for a proposal, and it's got all these requirements, and you address every single one of them perfectly. The high score you're going to get? You're going to get a green. Why? Because green means that you're compliant and you're acceptable. You know what's really going to kick the wind? Purples and blues. Purples are good, blues are outstanding. So the question is how do you get purples and blues? You get purples and blues by having evaluated strengths. So what's an evaluated strength? an evaluated strength that was something that wasn't asked for in the request for proposal, but adds value to the government. It adds value. So, what does that mean? Well, what you need to do is you need to find things that weren't asked for, and you need to provide those as part of your solution, and it adds value. Well, guess what ISO certification, does for you? None of these RFPs ever ask for, ISO certifications. So all you have to do is connect the dots to show that how your ISO certified processes and your ISO program, adds value to the customer. That's all you have to do to get evaluated strengths. The other half of that is you got to demonstrate that your ISO program with its formal risk management program and all the corporate maturity that it conveys shows that you are a low risk bidder. So that's half of your proposal score, their risk rating. So it hammers the scoring matrix to death. It's, maxing out your risk rating, and it's also giving you evaluated strengths. So here's an example. This is a real example. I redacted my company's name, Analytic Strategies, because I no longer own the company. But this was from a debrief. This is a government slide for a $65 million NGA contract that we won. And you can see the U, so it's unclassified. So, we write this, massive proposal, and this is our score. Ultimately, it came down to we were assessed as a purple plus. It's like you write this massive proposal, and they say, "Oh, you got a purple plus." It's like, that's it. Like, I was expecting something a little bit more fancy than that, but no, we were a purple plus. Well, that was the winning score, so it was a good score. So how did we get that? Well, we were compliant across the board, so we started out with all greens. And then we got evaluated strengths. So let me show you a few of those evaluated strengths. Strength number one. So strength number one was not only a strength, but if you look at the third bullet down, it was assessed as a significant strength, which means that it was weighted even more than a regular strength. So in these debriefs, they will tell you what your strengths were and what your weaknesses. We had no weaknesses, and that's why we got all greens, to start with, and we were compliant. But they will tell you, what they consider to be a strength and what they consider to be a weakness. And on this page right here, where they're, justifying giving us this evaluated strength, they cite ISO not once, but twice. The offer's corporate experience backed up by its proven certified processes, ISO 9001, would reduce the risk and improve the overall performance. Notice that risk is cited in there. Risk. And, again, our corporate credential of ISO 9001 validating that we were going to have reduced risk. Now let's look at the second one. Now this is just a regular strength. It wasn't significant, but I consider it to be damn near identical to the previous one, but the government did it. So again, they cite our ISO credential not once, but twice. The offer's ability to relate risk management approaches to the ISO 9001 quality management system allows the government to have greater confidence. Again, risk. Risk is half your sport. Now, what I'm going to tell you in this next, the next mistake, I'm going to steal my thunder a little bit. The bigger the bid, the less the government cares about everything else, and they focus on risk and corporate maturity. It's the only thing that they really care about is risk and corporate maturity. Because if you're bidding on a $65 million contract, if they got to give you a contract that size to a small business, do you think that they're really concerned, how many years you had agency experience? They don't care about agency experience. Are you a viable company? Do you know how to do corporate functions? Are you going to be in business 3 months from now? Is the size of this contract going to cause you to implode? And I know what that means because I almost imploded under my first prime contract. I understand why the government stresses this. The worst thing that you can do, you can have the best proposal in the world that says all the right things about your solution and how great and wonderful you are. But when they give you that contract, if you are crushed under the weight of it, that was a bad bid decision, a bad selection award decision on their part because you were high risk. You couldn't handle the weight of the large contract. And honestly, I fell in that situation on my first prime contract until I wisened up and kind of got some corporate maturity. So that's what the government is really concerned about. And that's what they're focusing on. So again, let's take a look at the next thing. I use ISO certification as an adjective. Why? Because that adjective, when you're saying that you have an ISO certified this and an ISO certified process for that, that conveys a lot of stuff. Again, it says that it has been audited by an accredited third party and found fully compliant with the with the ISO standard, which is the globally accepted industry best practice. It implies that you're making data-driven decisions about it. It's under constant, management review, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It conveys a lot of information in a tiny little word, ISA certified, as an adjective. And here it is again. What we did, just for a little bit of context, we identified staffing this highly secure contract as being the highest risk. That was the biggest risk that we identified, and we identified it. Trust me, we identified it, and we assessed it to show our corporate maturity and how low risk we were. We identified the risk and we assessed it, and we had a risk management plan in place for it. And then we started talking about our ISO certified onboarding process, as part of the solution to mitigate that risk. So their ISO 9001 certified processes align to best in industry practices that will help streamline onboarding of new employees, which was, again, the highest risk to onboard, to identify, recruit, and onboard highly cleared individuals that all had to have polygraphs. So this is right here what I would say the capstone, of all of these mistakes. If you get number 10 right, you are going to be wealthy. Fact. Mathematically speaking, you are not going to fail. So I call this mistake right here trying to get rich selling lemonade. Nobody gets rich from a lemonade stand. The deal is you can't sell enough cups of lemonade. You just can't. It's just too low priced. You just can't do it. What's selling lemonade in the world of federal government contracting? Well, it's chasing small contracts. Small contracts are just like cups of lemonade. They're hard to win, and they don't give you that much when you do win. Now, why are they hard to win? Well, I'm going to give you a personal experience. When I first started out, I thought like, hey, I need to do this prime contracting stuff. So I identified a prime contract request for proposal, and I think it was for like seven people. And I thought like, hey, I could do that. Like the government can think that a really ultra small company without much experience could manage a 7-person prime contract. Well, I thought that way, and so did 54 other bidders. I was one of 55 companies who bid on that 7-person prime contract. My very first prime contract that I did win, I was worth $15 million. It made me a multimillionaire. And I was one of 7 bidders. One of 7. The larger the prime contract becomes, especially in the small business set aside, the fewer, dramatically fewer bidders you're going to face. I've been in this industry, like I said, for about a quarter of a century, and on average, it's about 10 bidders for massive small business set-aside contracts. I'm talking about 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 million plus. There's about 10 or fewer. Now, of those 10, I guarantee you half of them are not legitimate bidders. So the effective number of bidders is probably fewer than 5. So you really have like a 1 in 5 chance. So let's press on. So they're easier to bid, but they're also easier to write. Why are they easier to write? Well, it's just like that NGA bid. They started caring less and less about my work experience in NGA, which I had zero experience in NGA. Nada. None. They didn't care about that. Why? Because I was low risk. They were going to give a contract to somebody that was still going to be in business in 6 months, that wasn't going to be crushed under the size and the weight of it. Now, I wasn't that big of a company. They didn't know that. They're only allowed to read what's in that proposal. They don't get to know how many employees I have, how big my corporate office is. It's what I put on that in that proposal. That's the only thing that they get to read. When I won my very first prime contract, I was a 1-person company and I had no revenue coming in, none. And I won a $15 million prime contract. It's so much easier to write a much larger proposal than it is a smaller one. And the reason why that is because they shift their gears and they start focusing on corporate maturity and risk mitigation. And ISO certifications can help you with both. Again, this is content that I pulled from an actual winning proposal. Now, I want you to look at this right here. This was for U.S. Transcom, Transportation Command. Guess how much experience I had in US Transcom? Zero. Now, if this would have been like a seven-person effort, maybe a $3 million, contract, man, they would have crucified us. We never would have won. Why? Because we had no experience in Transcom. But when it gets up to 35 million now, all of a sudden they get a little antsy, like, oh, we need to make sure this company's going to be in business. So I start talking about my quality management system. I start talking about, ISO credentials. I start talking about a formal customer satisfaction plan, formal risk management plans. And then what I do is I start to relate those as benefits, evaluated strengths for the customer. So look at this right here. This is pretty consistent for a major chunk of my proposal. Nothing is about transportation. Nothing is about supply chain. Nothing is about warehousing. Nothing. Well, I'm talking about things that I can talk about because I can't really talk about Transcom because I don't know a damn thing about it. But I could talk about corporate maturity. I could talk about quality management. I can talk about risk management. I can talk about all the things that are really now just incredible importance to them because this is a $35 million contract that's going to go to a small business that nobody's ever heard of. Here's the other thing. Large bids obviously provide you a greater return on investment, but I'm going to show you some math that's going to make you wealthy. $1 million bid plus another $1 million bid is the same effort as a single $11 million bid. Same amount of effort, but the $11 million bid has a 450% greater return on investment. If you want to become wealthy, I've never met a wealthy small business owner that did not pursue this strategy or some form of it. I try to get people to bid on a contract that they have a 90% probability of losing, and nobody wants to do it. I'm going to propose a strategy, a year-long strategy that will make you very happy. Let's assume that you can put together one of these massive bids every 2 months, which, trust me, you're going to be bleeding through your eyes to do that. Now, AI can actually help you and make that doable now, but let's just say you do one of these massive bids every 2 months, and any one of these things will make you a multimillionaire. Now, the very first one, you've got a 90% probability of losing it, which means you have a 10% chance of winning it and a 10% chance of becoming a multimillionaire off that single award. Now, 2 months rolls around, you got a second bid going in there. Well, guess what? You've got a 19% chance of winning one or the other one or both. 2 months later, now we're at the 6 month point, you've got a 27% chance of winning one or more of those 3 bids. So now you kind of project out to a year, you've got 6 bids in, and you've got a damn near 50% probability of becoming a multimillionaire using this strategy. That's the strategy that every single wealthy small business owner that I've ever known has employed. And it worked for me too. I struggled for 11 years. I was chasing small bids and looking high risk, for the most part. I got ISO 9001 in 2013. I got CMMI Services Level 3 appraised in 2014. And I looked at myself and I thought, whoa, I'm now no longer risk. I got discriminators. I can stand out in the crowd. I've got things to write about on large contracts. And it makes me look really, really, really mature from a corporate standpoint. So it solved all my other mistakes that I was making. And from 2013 to 2016, in 3.5 years, I won nearly $400 million in prime contracts. But don't believe me. Do not believe me. You need to verify this yourself. So what I recommend that you do is you do the same research that I just did. In 2014, the Oasis small business contract was the biggest, best contract in existence for small businesses. They selected 108 small businesses and they pumped billions of dollars through that small business, set aside contract. Literally billions. And there were 108 of us. Yours truly was one of those, one of those companies. Between 2014 and 2019, a whole bunch of us, we grew so rapidly that we were acquired. And so 2019 rolls around, they got to replace the companies that were acquired that are no longer in existence. And they also got to replace the companies that are just ridiculously large now, that are no longer small. So they needed to bring on 58 new Oasis awardees in 2019. 53% of them were ISO certified, 31% of them were CMMI appraised, 70% had one or the other. In reality, it was a lot more than that because many of these awardees were joint ventures that didn't have websites that I couldn't verify their corporate credentials. So trust me, it was a lot more than 70% had corporate credentials. But now let's look at those small businesses that were graduated or off ramped off of the OASIS contract because they just grew. Of the 26 companies that were kicked off this contract because they grew so big, 23 of them were ISO certified. 23 out of 26 possessed ISO certifications. That's 88%. 9 out of 10 of the absolute best small businesses in federal government contracting in 2019, 9 out of 10 of them were ISO certified. So this right here is the strategy that I'm going to recommend that can change your life forever. Federal government contracting is like buying tuna fish. You can go to the grocery store and you can pay $1.19 for chunk light tuna, and you can get something that your cat will probably turn its nose against and not eat. Or you can spend 96 cents more and get solid white albacore tuna that tastes delicious. Why in the world would you not make that additional 96-cent investment to get the solid white albacore? Why? Launching a federal government contracting services company is one of the cheapest startups that you'll ever be able to launch. It's not the fast food industry. You don't have to buy into a multi-million-dollar franchise, spending millions of dollars before you flip your first hamburger. You can launch a federal government contracting company for $500. Again, it's like buying $1.19, tuna. There's 100,000 plus small businesses out there, and yours is going to rank damn near the bottom because you got a blank resume. So for a little bit of money, 96 cents, the equivalent, you get to be one of the top 0.1% of these companies. And you get to have that competitive advantage. So the question is why not buy the damn solid albacore? I didn't do it. So I'm not talking down to people because I didn't do it because it wasn't that obvious because I didn't think about it. It took me 11 years to figure this stuff out. So what's 96 cents in the world of federal government contracting? Well, if you were to go out and get ISO 27001, the total average cost, Google it, I'm not making this up, is about $55,000. $40,000 in prep, for the preparation for the audit, and $15,000 for the actual audit itself. So what we do, because we're a social impact company, is we offer 2 ISO certifications for less than half of that. We provide you ISO 9001 and ISO 27001. We do 99.999% of the work, for your audit prep. We provide you the documents. We provide you sample records. We do everything. We even attend the audit with you, and we pay for the audit. We have 100% success rate. Literally 100%. We've had not a single client to ever fail an audit, not a single one. And this is since 2020. So we offer a money back guarantee. You either get your ISO certifications, or you get your money back. Plus, we also add in, our Government Contracting Academy's advanced training program. Now, this is the fastest growing training program in industry. It is by far the fastest one. It is tailor-made for small businesses. Why? Because this is desperately what I needed. And so that's what I decided to do in 2020. So in 2020, I decided to get back to the industry. People in the Government Contracting Academy, they're extraordinarily, successful, from that training program. It's a $65,000 total value for $24,000. That's going to place you in the top 0.1 percentile. And this, like I said, the Government Contracting Training Program provides you 175, lessons. And any one of those lessons could save you like millions of dollars. And then the other thing that it does is it provides you hundreds of business tools, hundreds of business templates, hundreds, of sample documents. We give you sample proposal, sections, winning ones, so our goal is that we never want you to start with a blank sheet of paper. We always want you to start with something that was successful. And then that's your starting point. So you don't have to work through that 11 years to figure out what's going to work and what's not. You get it on day one. For those companies who take the tuna fish strategy to heart, they're successful. They're making it. That's what I propose that people do.